Hello folks, it's been a while since I made a talkie video, and that's what this will be. Mostly it'll be kind of a talkie video. And what I would like to do here is review my thoughts on the work of James Joyce within chamber music and Mr. Syd Barrett, which are connected through his song Golden Hair, which is from verse 5 of James Joyce's chamber music. I have a lot of thoughts to go through. I think I have some insights on a few things, and of course that's kind of why I put this together. I wanted to get a feel for the poetry of James Joyce and the music of Syd Barrett. I will say that they're both kind of hauntingly beautiful, and I think it's an excellent pairing, and they really do fit together well. I did use quite a bit of art, and I at first had thought that I would just use Van Gogh's art, and I thought that would be a good fit. But as we went on, I kind of realized that there were other works of art, because a lot of works of art do tell stories that fit the feel of certain verses better than others. And sometimes I just used a photograph. I didn't have this really well organized and written out when I started. And of course, when I first started these, I was just learning to play guitar. And I'm still a beginner in many ways, but over time, my palette of sounds on the guitar changed, and I thought it was appropriate to use other forms of art to fit with that, and I'm very happy with the finished product. And if you haven't gone through, now you can watch the whole series of songs that I've made, including Syd Barrett's Golden Hair from verse 5. All the music through there, which I made and put together for this. Each verse unique, each having its own feel, each having its own kind of artwork, and each having its own rhythm and meter and sound. It's been a wonderful process, and I do very much. I'm very grateful to have it done, and very happy that it's done. Because none of us know how much time we really have, and there were times when things went badly. There was a lot of work to do, and I got sick a couple times. Had a blood clot, and I wasn't even sure if I was, going to. You never know how much time you have, so it's really wonderful to have an idea and just go do it. And I very much, if you're listening to this, I very much promote the idea of you doing the same. We all have ideas and things that we want to do, some of which are very beautiful and will last a long time. And we can decorate the world with those ideas. And to me, that's what a healing person, a whole person does. They decorate the world with beauty, and it surrounds them, and it's innate to them, and they can give that to the world and make the world a better place and help others to do the same. So I have a number of points here that I'd like to kind of go through. They're just kind of loosely put together. I formed them, I guess, just freely as thoughts once I was done, and so I'll kind of run through those and discuss them as we go. The first thing I would like to do is, of course, as I mentioned, give thanks to people who have created things of beauty. And I feel like James Joyce and Syd Barrett were people of that nature, as was Van Gogh. People that were decorating the world and making it more beautiful and more experienced through their own personal experiences, and sharing those things with other people for good or bad. Whether or not they were successful or failures, that permeates James Joyce's work, it permeates Syd Barrett's work, and it permeates Vincent van Gogh's work. Of course, no one wants to be a failure all the time, but we have to recognize failures. And in a strange way, I think many of us dwell on our failures instead of looking at them as a part of life that has helped develop a beauty within our lives in the long term. Maybe not in the short term, but in the long term, made our lives extremely beautiful over that period of time. If not heartfelt, deeply felt, and ingrained within ourselves, so that we have a respect not just for our own lives, but for the lives of other people. All those failures are necessary. All those successes and failures, they feed that wisdom that ties in with each of us being human and recognize the humanity in one another. For that reason, those three people, those three artists to me are very important. They are very, almost sacred to me. Now, one of the things that hit me as I was running through these is the incredible variety of rhythm within James Joyce's poetry. I love it. And of course, I find so many similarities to Syd Barrett's music, first with Pink Floyd and then as a solo artist, to James Joyce's poetry. Extremely odd rhythms, extreme variety, wonderful word use, and quite a bit of similar word use, and I'll get into that a little bit later, as it's quite obvious that Syd was borrowing from poets like James Joyce and adding that to his music, which, in my opinion, makes his music even more attractive. Now, one of the similarities I think you'll find is within James Joyce's letters. Now, before I move on with this, I would just like to point out that James Joyce is most well known for his novel Ulysses. And there is a whole holiday set aside for this in Ireland, and justifiably so. I mean, it's a work of genius, but it's not for me. And the reason it's not for me is because it's so intricate and so lengthy that if I looked at it the way I like to look at things, I would never stop looking at it. I don't know how to describe this, but if I was actually going to look at Ulysses, I could spend maybe 10 years trying to tear apart Ulysses. I spent over a year just trying to mess with chamber music, which is 36 short verses of poetry. So if I was to actually try to examine Ulysses the way I like to examine things, I think I would never be finished with it. And I certainly wouldn't be able to make my own things, which is what I want to be able to spend more and more time doing. So the variability of James Joyce is within Syd's music and echoed within it, but also the letters of James Joyce, the selected Joyce letters, and I'll suggest you get this book if you're a James Joyce or a Syd Barrett fan. It is important because these stories within these letters are correlated within chamber music. If you like chamber music, and I suggest everyone read chamber music, the poetry. It's incredibly touching, and it's not a difficult read. So this book, Selected Joyce Letters, edited by Richard Ellman. I'll kind of give you the information for the book on the screen. It's Viking Press, New York, 1957, etc. Now, within these letters, if you read them, there are some correlations to not only chamber music, but also would be interesting to anyone who is a Syd Barrett fan. And so, just for a moment here, I'm going to kind of take a moment, and I'll read you a few sections of his letters. Now, James Joyce fell quite in love. He felt he was betrayed, and then he came back to his love. And those are captured within his letters. They're also basically the plot of chamber music, the poetry. That's the flow of the poetry, is how this man goes from being generally in love to being specifically in love with an individual, losing that love with that individual, and then eventually having a reconciliation of sorts and coming to a kind of a, I guess you could say, a feeling of contentment with the world around him. And if you are a Syd Barrett fan, I think you will find that quite interesting as well, quite quite noteworthy. So I'll read you a few things from this book real quick. This is page 158. I have heard this only an hour ago from his lips. My eyes are full of tears, tears of sorrow and mortification. My heart is full of bitterness and despair. Have pity for my poor wretched love. I cannot call you any dear name, because tonight I have learned that the only thing I believed in was not loyal to me. Is it all over between us? So this devastation at a perceived betrayal and loss of a specific love is a kind of a turning point, I feel, in Mr. James Joyce. It resolves in a recognition of total love and dedication, and also a fixation on that love and development of that love. I have been a fool. He speaks her name a number of times, and he says, I am speaking now to the girl I loved, who had red-brown hair, and sauntered over to me, and took me so easily into her arms, and made me a man. I don't know necessarily that this is a recollection of James Joyce's first ever encounter or love, but it is a recollection quite clearly of his first love. Now, the recognition of that first love is clearly stated on page 161, and I would like you to note a few things here. Okay? So let's take a look at this. When I wrote them, I'll go back one page. So I like to think of you reading my verses, though it took you 5 years to find them out. Now remember that, please, if you will. Read my verses, though it took you 5 years to find them out. So he is hiding verses about this woman, and she's finding out about it later. When I wrote them, I was a strange, lonely boy walking about myself at night and thinking that someday a girl would love me. But I never could speak to the girls I used to meet at houses. Their false manners checked me at once. Then you came to me. You were not, in a sense, the girl for whom I had dreamed and written the verses you find now so enchanting. She was perhaps, as I saw her in my imagination, a girl fashioned into a curious grave beauty by the culture of generations before her, the woman for whom I wrote poems like Gentle Lady or Thou Leanest to the Shell of Night. Right there, he specifically makes a mention of chamber music. Thou Leanest to the Shell of Night is one of the verses within that collection of poetry. But then I saw that the beauty of your soul outshone that of my verses. There was something in you higher than anything I had put into them, and so for this reason, the book of verses is for you. It holds the desire of my youth and you, darling, for were the fulfillment of that desire. So very clearly there, he notes that the verses and everything within them were specifically written, though imagined, and eventually captured by the woman that he eventually falls in love with. Very clearly stated, and I will point out to you, there were a collection of notebooks of art and other things put together by Mr. Barrett and given to a certain someone. If you are familiar with Syd Barrett, you know who that person is, and she returned them to him. That very likely was a collection of romantic items that tied the two together. And for whatever reason, at the time, perhaps it wasn't recognized by that person, but that very likely was a record of the eternal dedication and romantic spirit within Mr. Barrett that was captured within those things. So, just as an aside. So, let's take a look also. I would just like to mention the use of language by these two men, that it is not always something that I would consider to be entirely logical. And as if you know anything about me, you know my background is largely scientific, and it is a degrading form of language, a very left brain form of language that is used on a daily basis by almost all of humanity in this modern science era. It is mundane, it is boring, and in a way I feel that it takes away from interactions between people, because we no longer feel that we have a creative hold of the language itself that we use. Although poets, of course, do not do that. They are immersed within the language that they use. It is language that they are bending to their whim, with their will, and creating landscapes, beautiful landscapes, beautiful pictures for the mind. And it really is sad, I think, that more people are creating a narrative, an internal narrative of their lives, entirely with their left side of the brain instead of using right side brain. Other people may not understand entirely what uh, pronunciations, variations of pronunciation, variations of presentation, the way that perhaps a developed poet will modify speech and language simply because it's pleasurable to do so. And in doing that, you internalize a created form of language which is much more rewarding to the self than simply following like a how-to book on how to, manual on how to build something, which of course has its place, but it's also incredibly boring and distant from the connection to a person. So I find it interesting that both of these individuals have done this. Now, as far as the use of art, I've tried to use quite a bit of art, and I learned a number of things about art in the process of doing this. And if you've seen some of my videos, I do encourage you to go through and watch them. Try and understand and read about a number of these artists, their personal stories, and the stories behind their art. And Eugene Delacroix, a very interesting individual. Francisco Goya, of course, wonderful individual. They have these amazing stories behind them. Picasso, of course. And even if you don't like the art itself, I feel as a society that not only do we not value art enough, I don't think that people understand that the nature of art has changed to a narrative that's captured within a story. And I feel that as a human being, we are tied to stories innately. We have within us this ability to understand and communicate through the use of stories. And often those stories just, they're capable of capturing things. And I'll get into this a little bit later. But the nature of capturing those stories and then using them to present something through a painting that the painting itself may not be entirely visually connecting, but when you realize that there's something more to it and you see that within the art, then you recognize the beauty of it, the soul of it, the glow of it. Someone who I learned about through the course of this that I think now is incredibly important is an artist named Mark Rothko. And perhaps you already knew about Mark Rothko, I don't know. I think a lot of artists and art historians take Mark Rothko for granted. But I think the vast majority of average citizens don't even know who Mark Rothko is, and that really is a shame. He's a wonderful artist, and he's doing something incredibly significant. And if you are a Syd Barrett fan, by the end of this video, I hope to show to you that Mark Rothko may have been quite important. Let's put it like that. So let's continue on. Now I'm going to take this and I'll put this also at the end of my Peeling Syd series. Now if you don't know, I did a Peeling Syd series. I kind of do a bunch of talkies discussing individual songs and kind of what they may have meant. And I'll put this at the end, although it doesn't entirely fit, it does kind of fit. So I'm going to throw this into the end of the Peeling Syd series as well. If you've enjoyed chamber music and the songs and the poetry of that, I suggest you check out Pink FLoyd. I suggest you check out Mr. Syd Barrett's solo work. And if you check into those and you like his music and you begin to realize there's a little bit more to his music going on, then go ahead and check out Peeling Syd, my Peeling Syd series, where I try to break down a number of his artworks and also his music. Again, it's in talkie form, like this, and it's a little bit, I don't know what to call that. It's long. It takes a lot of stamina, I think, to run through everything that may have been going on within Mr. Barrett's mind. He is very, very much a genius, in my opinion, as is Mr. Joyce, as is Mr. Van Gogh. And it's I think, quite common by modern society to label these people as just mad geniuses, and just kind of say, well, they're just kind of beyond understanding, and there's probably not even anything going on anyway. But in my opinion, there is quite a bit going on, and it is understandable. Quite a bit of it is, at any rate, if you put in the effort to try to understand another human being, which we should all be doing every day, right? We should all be putting in the effort to try and understand other human beings every day. So, now, one of the things that I kind of mentioned is the idea of decorating your life. And that's something that you do by creating things. And you can create many things. If you're a craftsman or a craftswoman and you like working with your hands, then we don't necessarily do that because it's going to make money. We do that because it's decorating our lives and making our own lives more beautiful. And when you feel that contentment with creativity and creation, then you will improve the people's lives around you as well, because not only will you be showing them how to live, but also you'll be a lot easier to get along with. For whatever reason, it changes something within us when we decide. And believe me, I mean, I have a regular mundane job that's extremely technical and at times incredibly boring. And it would be very easy to say I'm making money doing that. And it does, it pays well, and I can use that to pay my bills. But it's not enough. I need more. And I think most people do need more. And how they choose to do that is, of course, of their own free will. We all choose, what things we think are going to be rewarding for us. But I think that, I'm 20 minutes into this talk now, right? I mean, I've done all this work with the guitar and the art and everything. If you're following along, you're probably doing that for a reason. And the reason is probably because there's a part of that that's in you too. And if it's creating art or music, which is a form of art, right? Or making things, welding. I know an artist who has made some wonderful sculptures with welding. I know two actually now. And they're both incredibly interesting individuals. And whether you're 60 years old or 20, or a man or a woman, or a black American or white or whatever, you see these things consistently throughout humanity, that there is within quite a significant portion of people a recognition of the necessity to be creative. And I very much suggest that you take what time you have, including writing. I think quite a few people have wonderful stories within them to be writing. Put them together. And even if you don't have a really clear picture, just start doing it. And over time, those things will change. And who knows what you'll end up with. But you'll end up with something. And it'll be beautiful in its own way. So, in this way, I think it's sad that so much of society is consuming things that are poisonous, consuming everyday media that is negative, and wants us to turn away from one another, and wants us to turn away from the world, instead of immersing ourselves within one another and within the world and being cooperative. That makes me sad. And I don't want to be a part of that. And that's part of the reason why I put this together, is to help show people that we can be part of a larger media that is positive and creative and beautiful, and decorate one another's lives. So this is pretty much, I guess, what I could say, kind of the end of the talky part. I want to come back to this here in a little bit, and I'm going to discuss a couple things. Now, please realize that those videos, I've organized them by verses. They're not by when I made them. So if you watch through the playlist, you won't get them by when I made them. But if you're interested in guitar, something I'll say is that you don't have to be really good at guitar to play guitar. That doesn't... It's kind of embarrassing to go back and listen to some of them, because... And it's a little bit odd that some of the songs that are quite slow still fit the feel and rhythm of the verses, even though I know at that time For some of the songs, I was playing slow because that's the only way I could play. But it fits, and sometimes they sound pretty good. That obviously, I mean, I'm limited in my guitar and I'm limited in my voice. I'm not some professional musician or singer, but they definitely are interesting to listen to. And within them, you can kind of pick up on the development of guitar within me over time. So I don't want to go back and change any of them. I want them to stand kind of on their own, and you can kind of determine on your own, I guess, which ones you think might be better or worse. I don't know. I don't know if any of them are better or worse, but there are some that I think may capture your ear a little bit better than others. I don't know. So what I would like to do now is I would just like to run through a number of notes about the poetry of chamber music itself before I move on. So some of these verses were quite noteworthy to me, and I'll kind of give you a note about them as we go. The first one that's very important to me is verse 4. And the reason for this is not just the content of the verse, but also its context. It is located just before golden hair, which is verse 5. Now, Syd, in my opinion, is a poet and musician of genius. And as such, he leaves spaces between his ideas. And musicians, I've heard musicians say this quite often. I don't totally understand it. But musicians will say that if you leave gaps, it catches people's attention. Yeah? You see that? If you leave gaps and spaces, it draws people in. So, what all is Mr. Barrett trying to relay within chamber music? He's obviously pulling from it with verse 5. He's doing it verbatim. Is he trying to relay other stories within himself and within this collection of poetry that are applicable to him, and applicable to his story, and applicable to his development, applicable to his humanity, and are they applicable to us in our attempt to try to understand the ununderstandable? Because if there is someone who didn't want to be understood, it's clearly Mr. Barrett. So let's look at verse 4. Its proximity to verse 5 means it might be pointed to indirectly by Mr. Barrett. So this is immediately started with, when the shy star goes forth in heaven. That is one of the most accurate assessments of Mr. Barrett, that I couldn't write something more accurate that contains what I perceive to be the nature of the essence of Mr. Barrett. The shy star going forth in heaven almost totally captures what may have been intended by Mr. Barrett. Now, I will point out that Joan Boaz, I don't know how to say her name. She does a reading of this. She's famous, of course, 50s and 60s. She's associated with Bob Dylan. She does a reading specifically of this verse. You can listen to it on YouTube if you want. I won't link it, but it's not hard to find. I don't think it's all that good. I like that she did it. But, I mean, I like her other stuff better. I mean, she just does a cold reading of the verse, which I don't like. I think it's meant to be sung. I think all of these are meant to be sung. They all have their own internal rhythm. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But if you notice, not only does the shy star go forth in heaven, but it does so all maidenly and disconsolate. I will point out that there is an individual who does poetry readings. His name is Renewed Poet. And perhaps I can kind of send him a message and ask him to do readings of chamber music and do a little bit more of a breakdown and a discussion of them. I've talked with him on numerous occasions about various lyrics for songs from the Beatles and other things. When I did Syd and Pink FLoyd The Beatles, which is a little mini-series I put together, he was helping me kind of with some ideas. Very interested in poetry, and I suggest you check out his channel. At any rate, hear you amid the drowsy even, What a wonderful use of poetry right there. The drowsy, even the idea of it getting late and sleepy. An interesting way of proposing the idea of night. One who is sitting by your gate, his song is softer than the dew. Oh. I don't know. That sounds like watching the buttercups cup the light kind of a line from Mr. Barrett's songs. And he has come to visit you. Now, in the second verse of this, something that is noteworthy to me. O bend no more in reverie when he at eventide is calling, nor muse who may this singer be. That line indicates what may be happening, the dynamic behind this verse. Whose song about my heart is falling? Know you by this the lover's chant, 'tis I that am your visitant. So in this way, the writer of this poem is specifically stating that these are written for someone in an unknown fashion. This is exactly what we were discussing in James Joyce's selected letters, that he had collected these for a person. He may or may not have totally understood who that imagined totality of love would be, but eventually he came to recognize it as his singular love named Nora. In this way, Mr. Barrett may have been doing the same thing. He may have been collecting ideas in notebooks as an indicator and signal of love and writing songs who were meant to be falling about someone's heart. And in that way, he would visit the person that they were made for, although they might not even recognize, as James Joyce himself has said, that Nora would read the verses and not know that they were written for her. That Syd may be doing the same thing. Now, for me, particularly if you're familiar with my work and did Syd and everything else, you know, I think that Syd may not have only been working with or on his own. He may have been working with Pink FLoyd. He may have been working with other groups like Led Zeppelin or like the Beatles or even Peter Gabriel. I think there are indicators certainly that he influenced these other bands, but I do wonder in some of the songs that echo his writing so closely whether or not he was still working with them and not announcing it, and perhaps writing love songs that were meant to be falling about someone's heart without them actually knowing, as is called out in that particular verse. Another verse that's noteworthy, verse 7, my love is in a light attire. If you look at the second portion of that verse, there where the gay winds stay to woo the young leaves as they pass. In this way, the comparison is made between life and leaf, or leaves. And this, of course, is the same metaphor that's used by Mr. Barrett in one of his most beautiful songs, Dark Globe, where he mentions that pussy willow that smiled upon this leaf. A very delicate statement of love that's tied to the idea of temporary life within a leaf. The next verse that I would kind of like to point you to is verse 8. And the reason for that is kind of captured in the very first section of verse 8. Who goes amid the greenwood, with springtide all adorning her? Who goes amid the merry greenwood to make it merrier? I can't think of a more apt collection of more apt description of the idea of the piper at the gates of dawn from the wind in the willows. It's very specifically stated in that first portion of the verse 8. Let's continue on. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of these too much. I don't want to drone on about these things. I'm just going to say, if you read through these, you'll be quite surprised at a number of correlations you can draw between them and Mr. Barrett, his life, and also his poetry. Verse 10 is a wonderful verse because of the rhythm of the verse. Bright cap and streamers, he sings in the hollow, come follow, all you that love. Now, in Did Syd Barrett and Pink Floyd, the Beatles, I mentioned this kind of off-kilter rhythm at the end of stanza or at the end of lines that catches your attention by not fitting the rhythm of the other lines. In this particular verse, James Joyce is doing exactly the same thing. With ribbons streaming, he sings the boulder, in troop at his shoulder, the wild bees hum. And I will point out also that it's quite enjoyable to make music for verses like this. Oddly enough, you wouldn't think perhaps that being off-kilter rhythm as they are, that they would be fun to make music for, but they are structured very well, or at least well enough to fit a song around, and then the off-kilter last line really makes it interesting and fun to make. Now, something I would like you to check out is verse 13. Now, wind of your good courtesy, I pray you go, and come into her little garden and sing at her window. Singing, the bridal wind is blowing, for love is at his noon. And soon your true love will be with you, soon, oh soon. Not only is this noteworthy because of... There's a line, of course, in Jug Band Blues, it's awfully considerate of you to think of me here, and I'm obliged, and I'm most obliged, etc., etc. In this way, now wind, I pray your good courtesy, this idea of requesting courtesy and positive intent, it's captured within this. The next poem, or next verse that I would kind of like you to look at is verse 17. There is no word, nor any sign can make amend. He is a stranger to me now who was my friend. This is, of course, tied to the idea of losing a love and having a love influenced by another person. This happens, of course, in modern society. We don't live alone in small groups of people. The people that we love are constantly being influenced and interacted with other people. It can create quite a bit of jealousy. And as we read in Joyce's letters, he also was consumed by that jealousy. I think it's entirely natural to feel that. Of course, to develop a much more positive emotion over time is the better way to live life, and to allow people to develop on their own, in their own way, as best as we can, that's the correct way of living life. But it's also incredibly difficult to do when you're consumed with the love of another person, which I think also is entirely human. Now, I haven't really gone into a lot of the the strange rhythm of some of these, but you'll notice that, of course, some of these are very long and structured 4 lines with consistent rhyme, and some are not. They're, for example, verse 21. He who hath glory lost, nor hath found any soul to follow his, among his foes in scorn and wrath, holding to ancient nobleness. That high and consortable one, his love is his companion. I will tell you, writing a song for this was the hardest one for me to write, because it's ugly. And I feel that the rhythm and meter of it is ugly on purpose, because it's discussing something that is kind of a negative emotion and loss. And it's erratic by nature. It's captured within the poetry. And it's captured within its disagreeable presentation, the disagreeable way in which, if you read this, trust me, it won't hit you well. It won't leave you with a feeling of well-being. It'll leave you in an uneven and unhappy way. And that is entirely by design. And so for that reason, it's difficult to write a song for something like that. It was for me anyway. Compare that with verse 24. Silently she's combing her long hair, silently and graciously, with many a pretty air. What a beautiful line. Consumed with the beauty of a woman combing her hair, a very simple action. And yet, this entire verse flows so well. This was one of the earliest ones that I made a song for. that I felt was a complete song. It has a long narrative style to the poem, and it was rewarding on many levels to make that. Again, though, I mean, take the good with the bad, right? I mean, successes and failures. In many ways, verse 21 is erratic and unsuccessful by design. That's the beauty within it, is that it's actually much like kind of a lot of music, like punk music, is kind of abrasive. So is that verse by design, and it does it well. Let's look at verse 25. A beautiful, light, soft poem. It's combining these kind of ideas of traveling lightly and being totally in love. Lightly come or lightly go, though thy heart presage thee woe, veils in many a wasted sun, or red let thy laughter run, till the irreverent mountain air ripple all thy flying hair. What a beautiful set of imagery, a beautiful flow, again tied with hair, and again, an easy song to write for this poetry. Very simply made. The next verse that I would kind of like you to take a listen to or check out is verse 31. Oh, it was out by Donny Carney. Now in the second portion of that verse, along with us the summer wind went murmuring oh happily, but softer than the breath of summer was the kiss that she gave to me. Now this idea of the summer wind, Frank Sinatra, I know, did a song called Summer Wind. It's a really beautiful song. This idea of being in the height of summer, the height of love, and that being tied to a nice warm wind, it's all within the sensation of that particular verse. It's captured very well, and I cannot tell you how many times Syd Barrett and Pink FLoyd use references to wind, warm wind, tropical wind, warm air, breezes, etc. It permeates all of their songs. Verse 33, I liked quite a bit. That may be my best song. Looking back at things now, that I don't know by best, but it's quite catchy and it's enjoyable to play. Just technically on a guitar, that one was the one that I felt technically, not sound wise, but technically was the most fun for me to play on guitar. This verse has a wonderful rhythm to it because of the now, oh now introduction. Now, oh now, in this brown land. Now, in this brown land, that brown land idea it's within not only Pink Floyd's music and Syd's, but also within Led Zeppelin. I believe the song Kashmir has a reference to brown land or something like that. Anyway, this specific verse has a wonderful rhythm to it, and for as a basis for that framework, I used Dolly Rocker. I didn't note that in the making of the video, but I'll tell that to you now. Dolly Rocker, let's see, I'll give you... That's the introduction to Dolly Rocker. You got that kind of that shortcut, that it's an uneven step. So for this song, I used that same kind of idea. So I just kind of continued on with it, and it fit the rhythm of this poem very, very well. Influenced by Dolly Rocker, one of my favorite songs by Mr. Barrett. It's a beautiful song. And if you are interested in the mystery of Mr. Barrett, then check the lyrics to Dolly Rocker. He kind of gives you a whole bunch of clues right there in Dolly Rocker about reasons why he may have moved on from the scene that he was in. In verse 35, we have a noteworthy line. I'll call it the second line. Sad as the seabird is when going forth alone. This is, of course, very similar to Baudelaire's Albatross. We discussed this in Peeling Syd in some of his poems, and this also is used within the song Echoes, I believe, by Pink Floyd, when they mention overhead the albatross hangs motionless upon the air. I'll get into the rhythm of that later on. But certainly right here is a mention of the seabird is being being sad. And I'm not sure which one is older. I assume Baudelaire's poem is actually older, but this has the flavor of the single solitary seabird and loneliness all tied within it. Okay, now the last verse that I want to discuss is the very last verse, and this is important. Now, not only does James Joyce go through a period of despair within his selected letters, he states it quite clearly here. My heart, have you no wisdom thus to despair? My love, my love, my love, why have you left me alone? This is incredibly reminiscent to the Bible. My Lord, why have you forsaken me? It is on purpose. Mr. James Joyce was, to my knowledge, was a Christian and was influenced by Christianity in certain ways. I don't want to get into that too much, but obviously, I mean, there's anyone who is influenced by religion is going to carry that over into their art in certain ways. It does not have to be dogmatic, and it does not have to be overbearing, and it does not have to brutally attack people. It can be expressed in an entirely beautiful and accepting way, and in that way, James Joyce has presented it here. An internalized, beautiful way. And I would like to point out to you that he's combining two ideas there. He is combining the beauty of love with the ideas that are presented with love and duty to a higher spiritual calling. And they are equated. And this is important. Because that may be what is happening within all romantic poetry and romantic songs. The recognition of the tie of those things, that through the love of one another, and this is captured within the poem Abu Ben Adem, that a person has a love of their fellow man. And it's easy to, in many ways, fall in love with another person, whether that's man, woman, or a person of another culture, or, but do we not also have love of our own families? Do we not also have love of our own kin? Do we have love of all of humanity? It's very difficult to feel those things if you don't even have of love of yourself and love of then next another person that you feel entirely devoted to, that you wish to enrich their life, even if it means the detriment of your own. Which is, of course, why so many artists like Amy Winehouse sings that love is a losing game. Because in the long term, you're very likely to lose. Even if you don't lose out on the love immediately and everything associated with it, all the garbage that's associated with material existence. But eventually, even if you find the person that you love, you will be separated through the process of death, at least temporarily. So, that capturing of beauty is integral to the development of these things. And I think it's wonderful that not only is James Joyce doing that within his poetry, that last verse, verse 36, really is a wonderful, wonderful verse. It's full of imagery. It's full of fantastic ideas. I'll just give you a few portions of it. The thunder of horses plunging, foam about their knees, arrogant in black armor behind them stand. The charioteers, they cry unto the night their battle name. I moan in sleep when I hear afar their wheeling laughter. They cleave the gloom of dreams, a blinding flame, clanging, clanging upon the heart as upon an anvil. See, do you hear all the L's in there? It's being developed. And of course, Mr. Barrett also, within many of his songs, he repeatedly hits the same sounds over and over again. Joyce is doing the same thing here. They come shaking in triumph, their long green hair. They come out of the sea and run shouting by the shore. I have a favorite work of art made by an artist that I know here locally. of horse riders kind of riding their horses into the ocean. And when I saw his work of art, I showed him this verse, and it's just interesting how well those two ideas synthesize. I wish I could show it to you, but it's not mine, you know. And I guess I could ask him to show it, but well, I'll send him a text. We'll see if he says it's okay for me to put it here in the video. But his name is Keith Powell, and he's a local artist. And he does a lot of really great art, and he's a really great human, a great human being. So we'll see what he says, and if I can include it here, then I will. At any rate, I've gone on for quite a bit. Haven't done a talkie in a while, and I thought maybe this was kind of an appropriate setting for me to give a bunch of ideas. I do hope that aspects of creativity, your own aspects of creativity, will be developed. I'll give you, and even within your dreams, and I've mentioned dreams and symbolism and all these things that are a part of who we are and the messages contained within them. I will relay to you a story of a dream I had. I've had, I don't know, 3 or 4 dreams of Mr. Barrett, meeting with him or not meeting with him. And I only remember 2 of them, really. I wrote them down somewhere, but I'll just relay the last one. And this one I had fairly recently, and it was kind of a completing dream. Essentially, in that dream, I met him on a street. It was in England somewhere, and there was a sign up, and I can remember the sign, although it didn't have anything directly to do with him. It said Barrett on it, and there were like Picasso-style doves on it, and they were moving things, and they wanted to move this sign, and I offered to help him move the sign. And that's about it. I mean, he was quiet, and he said yes, thank you for helping to move the sign, or something like that. But that was it. That was the dream. You know, it was kind of a fast dream, and I thought, I remember the design, the layout of the sign, but that's about it. What's the point of that? I don't know. You know, and it could be, of course, that simply by discussing him, I'm helping in some way to relay some of the intents of things that have been misrepresented, in my opinion, by other people. Because there's no way of knowing, really, entirely what's going on in the mind of a creative genius who's chosen to remain obscure. But it can kind of be felt. And I would just say that I would hope that if this kind of topic is of interest to you, that you at least will form your own opinion about people like James Joyce and people like Syd Barrett. Very complicated people. And it's very easy to look at someone who is kind and think that they are less than you. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's very easy for society to look at people that have been left behind, or people that have been cast to the side, and say that they are not someone that is worthy of consideration or respect. It's easy to disrespect a kind person, and it's easy to think that they may not be overly intelligent. But I'll say that sentiment is quite possibly quite wrong, and that people that are demure and kind can also be incredibly intelligent and worthy of your respect. And perhaps if we started respecting and enjoying the interaction with people like that a little bit more, then we would not only help our own lives, but help society as a whole. At any rate, those are my thoughts. Now, as an aside, I had previously mentioned that I would discuss Mr. Mark Rothko. He is an artist that I think is overlooked by many. I do not think he would have been overlooked by Mr. Barrett. He made quite a few extraordinary paintings that delicately relay the sentiment of emotion with blocks and layers of color. Those colors are often black and red. He did this in the 50s and 60s. And the quote by him is noteworthy because of specifically a painting that is referenced by Mr. Barrett's sister. And I'll give you her kind of quote here.
It was a very bad time for him. He did some artwork. He did a huge canvas about 6-7 foot in width, and it was all black. And in the bottom corner, about an inch by an inch, there was a little red square. And I remember looking at that and thinking, you know, he's in trouble. So he came home.
At any rate, as you can see, Mr. Barrett was considering the nature of a single block of red within a black background, very similar to Mr. Mark Rothko's paintings, and I would suggest even more noteworthy because it is specifically captured within the intent of that quote by Mr. Rothko. So in this way, we may understand what not only Mr. Barrett was trying to relay, but what he may have been feeling at the time, which is similar to what Mr. Rothko was feeling. Now, I did discuss the song A Painting Black within my Peeling Syd series, and I will relay that to you again. Not only is that song Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones noteworthy to me because it has essences of Mr. Barrett within it, but it also seems to be relaying a two-part story which may be referring a wedding and not a funeral. And this is important, of course, because the Rolling Stones attack the idea of a wedding again. And you can't always get what you want. That song, that particular song, which not only references a wedding, but also references going out and making civil protestations, political protestations. All of that is caught also within the film The Wall, repeatedly. So, just a side note, if you're interested in that topic. I hope you really enjoyed the collection of songs I made for chamber music. It was my pleasure to make them, and hopefully I made something that's kind of a gem that will shine like a diamond for quite some time. And if you haven't really given Mr. Barrett and Mr. Joyce consideration, I will say, as I mentioned before, there's an aspect to them that's able to capture this kind of glow, this ephemeral glow. I feel it's within Van Gogh's paintings more than any other painter. Somehow Van Gogh is able to make things glow. He has this kind of vibration almost to his paintings. And it's within Syd's songs as well. I feel it, at any rate. And I feel it's also in James Joyce's poetry here. It's wonderful, beautiful poetry. These three individuals, I can find that similarity in and kind of connect together. And I think if you give them a chance, you'll be able to make that connection as well. At any rate, I've gone on for well enough. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. I'll talk to you later.